The buzzards told her before the rifle shots ever did, circling low and patient over Dead Horse Ravine, and Naomi Kessler dropped her basket of wet laundry in the dust and ran toward the rim without once asking herself why she should care what became of Sheriff Cass Delano. She had every reason not to care. 6 months back he had marched her out of her own boarding house room in front of the whole street, certain she'd lifted a purse of coin from the mercantile till, certain enough to lock her in his jail for 4 days while the real thief, a drover long gone west by the time the truth came out, spent the stolen money in Cheyenne. 4 days of women looking away from her on the boardwalk. 4 days that had cost her the sewing trade of half the town, trade she'd only just begun to win back. But the buzzards did not care about old grievances, and neither, it seemed, did her feet, which carried her to the ravine's broken edge before her mind had finished arguing with her heart. Below, wedged against a shelf of red rock some 20 feet down, lay a man in a torn duster, one leg bent wrong, his silver star dark with dust and blood. Cass Delano did not move. For one terrible breath Naomi thought she had come all this way, thrown away every reasonable objection, only to find him already gone. Then his hand twitched against the stone, and something in her chest twisted loose and free, and she was already looking for a way down before she had decided to go. There was a game trail along the north wall, narrow and switchbacked, more suggestion than path, and she took it half sliding, catching at greasewood and rock, her skirt tearing at the hem, her palms scraped raw. She had nursed her mother through the coughing sickness 2 winters running. She knew what a body looked like when it was closer to the far side than this one, and it frightened her plainly how close he was. "Sheriff," she said it low, kneeling in the rubble beside him, her hands already moving over him the way they'd moved over her mother, searching for the worst of it without flinching from what she found. "Cass Delano, if you can hear me, you tell me where it hurts worst." His eyes opened, pale and glassy with pain, and found her face, and something moved through them that might have been shame or might have been simple disbelief. "You," he rasped, "of all the souls in this county. Don't waste your breath being surprised." She tore a strip from her petticoat, working fast, the way her mother had taught her, pressure first, always pressure first. Blood was the enemy, but panic was worse. There was a gash along his scalp that had bled freely but shallow, and beneath his ribs on the left side a deeper hurt from a bullet or a fall against the rock she couldn't yet say. His leg was the worst of it, twisted under him at an angle no leg should bend. Ambush. "Rustlers ran me off the trail up top, put a shot in me before I went over." His words came thin, rationed. "Left me for the buzzards, didn't figure anyone come looking this far out." "I wasn't looking for you," she said, and it was near enough the truth to sting them both. "I saw the birds." "Then I owe the birds my life, and you the trouble of it." A ghost of the old dry humor moved across his gray face, gone as quick as it came, chased off by a spasm of pain that arched his back and left him breathing in shallow, careful pulls. "Ravine walls are near sheer behind you, Miss Kessler. You go for help. You lose half a day getting up and half getting back with a wagon. I don't know as I've got half a day left in me." She knew it too. She had already done the arithmetic of distance and daylight and blood, the same cold sum she'd done at her mother's bedside, and it came out the same unbearable way. There was no time to fetch anyone. There was only what she could do herself with her own 2 hands in the failing light of this one afternoon. "Then I suppose you'll have to make do with me," she said, and set to splinting the leg with 2 lengths of dead cottonwood and the rest of her petticoat, binding it tight enough to hold, gentle enough that he only hissed once through his teeth and did not cry out. She packed the scalp wound and bound his ribs snug enough to ease his breathing, and all the while she talked to him low and steady, the way she'd talked to her mother in the worst of the fever nights, because a voice was sometimes the only rope a person had to hold onto this world by. "Why," he asked her once, through gritted teeth, while she worked, "would you climb down into a ravine for the man who locked you up on a lie?" She did not answer at once. She thought of the 4 nights on that hard jail cot, of the townswomen's averted eyes, of the sewing orders that had dried up like a creek in August. She thought, too, of the letter he had sent her, unsigned and unspoken of since. The day the truth came out, a note left at her door with a month's back rent paid in full and no name attached, though she had known his hand from the wanted notices tacked up at the jail. "Because you paid for your mistake even when you didn't have to say so out loud," she said, "and because no living creature ought to die alone at the bottom of a ravine for want of someone willing to climb down." She tied off the last binding and sat back on her heels, and only then let herself feel how badly her own hands were shaking. "Now, can you bear to be moved even a little? We can't stay here past dark. It gets cold, and there may be more than buzzards drawn to a wounded man before long." Somewhere above the rim, faint but unmistakable, came the drum of hooves along the ridge road, slowing, circling back the way riders do when they mean to be sure of a thing before they leave it be. Naomi went still, her hand pressed flat over Cass's chest as though she could hush even his heartbeat. "Rustlers," he breathed, so low it was barely sound at all. "Come back to see was I dead for certain. If they hear you moving down here, they'll finish what the fall didn't." She looked up at the darkening rim, at the two shapes that passed slow across it and were gone, and made herself breathe in time with the man beside her, matching her fear to his stillness until the hoofbeats faded west and did not return. It was, she thought, the longest silent minute of her life, longer even than the 4 nights she'd spent listening to her own heartbeat in his jail cell, and when it finally passed she found her hand was still resting over his heart, and neither of them moved to end that either. "They're gone," she whispered at last. "But we can't wait on your friends to lose interest a second time. We go now while there's dusk enough to hide us and light enough to see the trail." Getting him up the game trail was the hardest thing she had ever done with her body, harder than any hour at the washtub or over a needle by candlelight. She went below him, bracing his weight against her shoulder, letting him lean and drag his good leg while she guided the bad one, stopping every few yards while he fought down the gray wash of pain that kept threatening to take him under. Twice he nearly went down, and twice she held, planting her feet against the loose shale, gritting her teeth until her jaw ached, refusing to let the mountain have him back. "You could let me go," he said once, his voice barely a thread. "Save yourself the effort, nobody'd blame you." "I would blame me," she said, and hauled him another step. "Now hush and climb." Full dark had settled by the time they crested the rim, and Naomi's arms trembled like a plucked fiddle string. But he was breathing, he was upright, and when she eased him down against a boulder to rest before the last stretch to the road, his hand found hers in the dark and held on with what strength he had left. "I was wrong about you," he said. "Wrong in a way that cost you dear, and I never said it plain enough. I'm saying it now, in case I don't get the chance to say it prettier later. I was wrong, and I am sorry, and you came down into that ravine for me anyway, and I don't rightly know what a man does with a debt that size." "He doesn't do anything with it tonight," she said, softer than she meant to. "Tonight he lets a foolish laundress get him the rest of the way to a doctor." It took the better part of an hour more, him leaning on a fence rail she'd found and dragged over, her shoulder under his good arm, before the lights of town showed low and yellow ahead of them. And by the time Doc Ashworth came running out in his shirt-sleeves at her call, Cass Delana was gray and swaying but alive, unmistakably, stubbornly alive, and the whole slow terror of the ravine broke loose in her chest at last and left her shaking against the porch post while the doctor worked. He mended slow through that autumn, the leg knitting crooked but sound, the ribs healing tight, and every day of it Naomi came by with broth or bread or simply her company, not because anyone asked her to, but because she found she wanted to, and wanting had become, somewhere on that ravine trail, a thing she no longer apologized for. There were quiet evenings on the boarding house porch while his leg mended, when he'd ask her to read the county paper aloud because his eyes still swam some days from the fall, and she'd catch him watching her mouth instead of listening to the words at all. She scolded him more than once for rising before he ought, and he took the scolding like a man grateful simply to be scolded by her and no one else. The rustlers who had left him for dead were run down before frost set in, and Naomi's steady account of the hoofbeats on the ridge, given before the circuit judge, helped seal the case against them. She had not asked to be a witness to justice any more than a nurse in a ravine, but she wore both roles with a quiet pride that surprised her. It was Cass who stood up at the town meeting that November, legs still stiff, and told the assembled county exactly how Naomi Kessler had climbed down a rock face to save the life of the man who'd wronged her, and exactly what kind of woman that made her, and exactly what a fool the town had been to let her go hungry for trade over a lie he himself had believed too easily. The sewing orders came back within the month, and so, more slowly and more carefully, did her standing among the very women who'd once looked away. He asked her in the spring on the porch of the boarding house, with his hat in his hands like a boy and not a lawman at all. "I've got no right to ask anything of you," he said. "I locked you up on a lie and you pulled me off a rock ledge, and neither one of those debts is the kind a ring can settle. But I'm asking anyway, Naomi, because I have loved you since the night you held my hand in the dark and told me to hush and climb, and I don't intend to spend what's left of my life pretending otherwise." She looked at him a long moment, at the man who had wronged her and then spent a whole season proving, in patient daily kindness, that he meant to be worthy of the grace she'd shown him, and found that her answer had been waiting in her heart since that terrible, beautiful climb. "Then I accept," she said, "on the condition that you never again arrest a woman before you've asked her name." And when he laughed, low and full and easy, she thought that of all the sounds Dead Horse Ravine had nearly stolen from the world forever, that laugh was the one she was gladdest to have saved.